freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
So fuck the FCC. So as far as you're concerned, Lee, what weather in British Columbia going to be as we move?
Well, everything is going to get colder except for the northwestern region of the United States and the western part of Canada and out around Alaska. Normally during a grand solar minimum, that area stays about the same temperature or becomes a little bit warmer. So I would suspect that, over, on the west side of Canada and around Alaska, it wouldn't be too bad. But in the central part of Canada and the north central part of the United States, it will be substantially colder. And there will be some very, very cold, like Alberta Clipper type storms that will come down from the Arctic Circle and plunge those areas into a deep freeze. And that will actually come all the way down into Texas and the Gulf Coast eventually and during some of these storms.
Excellent answer. This is from One Small Daddy. Will having a standby generator stop pulses from an EMP?
No, it will not. You have to have it disconnected from the grid, disconnected from any electrical lines that run out from it, and it would need to be in a Faraday cage to protect it because it has a voltage regulator circuit in it that is susceptible to an EMP, or if it's got long wires on it, susceptible to a CME.
Now, what about a portable generator? If it's off, will they just fry?
If it's off and you have it in a cage, it will not be damaged. So you need to have it in a Faraday cage or a solid metal trash can or something of that nature and no wires hooked to it. Now, as far as a little small one and a small CME, you might not have to worry about it. But if it's got a transformer in there, then you do. So it depends upon what manufacturer of generator it is. And of course, it's got windings in there, so you've got the possibility of damaging things with that. So my recommendation would be to put it in a Faraday cage, if at all possible. Multiple layers, because there's a generator winding. Anywhere you have a winding, either it be in a transformer or an electric motor, or you have a long wire, that will act as an antenna to receive the energy from a CME or an EMP. Or even a positive lightning strike for that matter.
Well, good question from one of our biggest fans, Brent Stump up in Saskatchewan. Would this generator that's running be affected by a CME, and would a transformer that is disconnected be affected?
Yes. So it doesn't matter if it's running or not, it is affected. And if it is running, it has a much, much higher probability of being damaged than if it's not running. So, yeah, you want it to be disconnected and turned off.
As a person, how do you deal with the frustration you feel when given data and science just won't listen?
You can't beat a dead horse. And so, people don't want to believe something other than they already believe. They have a comfort zone in what they know and what they've been taught and what everybody around them believes. Religion, Santa Claus, what have you. People believe these things. People are superstitious, what have you. So you just, when confronted with that, I just point out things that are obvious, like, wow, it doesn't look like the same sky you saw 20 years ago, does it? That's a little bit more of a powder blue. Wonder why it's like that all the time. And I just start pointing out different things in the weather and so on and so forth to them in the cycles and go, did you know that George Washington went into New York riding a horse across New York Harbor, but without a bridge because New York Harbor was frozen solid? And just hit them with the facts like that. Or take a picture of the sun through the clouds and then show them a picture of that was painted during the Maunder minimum, and compare the two clouds, the colors, the multiple layers, so on and so forth. And I find that once you put enough evidence in front of somebody, you can, their interest will take it on. You can't ram it down your throat. You just got to drop subtle hints periodically, kind of like QAnon does. So let people figure it out on their own. Some people are smarter than others. Some people will figure it out. Some people never will. And, I always say there's only three types of people in the world. There's the wills, the won'ts, and the can'ts. The wills will make it happen. The won'ts won't, and the can'ts can't. So, and then there's the people that make things happen, the people that watch things happen, and the people that wonder what happened. So I always try to be in the first of each one of those, the people that make it and the people that will. And then I try to work with the people that, can to get them to do it, which is basically what this is all about, is to, inform the people so as that they can make intelligent decisions as to what's best for their particular application.
Now, I've been buying merchandise from our Oppenheimer Ranch store. Now, this merchandise simply has scientific data on it, like the CMIP6 graph, and they're getting good results with this because it's actual information, science you can share with a skeptic.
Right. And anything like that is good data. I recommend, you've got a couple of videos. David Dubine's got a few videos. There's, other people are starting to produce videos, and I just start pointing people in those directions. And then, some of the investors, have been calling me and talking to me about things, and some of those are now writing reports about, the grand solar minimum. It used to be they just talked about solar minimum, and now they've added grands to it because they're actually seeing, they see the same data we did. So, you have to come to the same conclusions when you see the same data.
Hey, can you got your connections? I can hear an echo. So if you're not talking, mute your connection, please. Now, Lee, do you believe in aliens?
Yes.
Do you believe an all-planet space navy exists?
You broke up. I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Do you believe an off-planet space navy exists?
No, I do not. The closest thing that
neither do
anybody
I.
has to that, the closest thing that anybody has to that is cosmonauts. And so that's just basically, a Russian soldier that goes into space. And so it's just basically a space soldier. So, they're part of their military. Unlike us, we're, NASA is a government agency, but it's not a military. But the Russian Space Organization or group is a military government type of deal. So, that's the only thing we have that ever goes off the planet as far as humans, as far as a military force. There's nothing on some other planet. There's, as far as that humans have put there as far as a human base. There's two. Space is an extremely hostile plasma environment, which has unbelievable levels of radiation and highly charged particles, moving through it in every direction all of the time. And so you have to have shielding to protect yourself and try to slow those particles down, as much as possible. But in a spacecraft that you have to get into orbit, it is very difficult to transport those extremely heavy materials that are extremely dense and thick to stop that. So anytime you are in space for any extended period of time, you are damaging your body. I mean, you don't even have to go to space to damage your body. You can be in a jet airliner at high altitude up near the poles during an aurora borealis type of event, and you'll get additional radiation there too, as well as these charged particles coming through, and that'll give you cataracts and a variety of other things. It's about the same as a dental x-ray or more, depending upon the energy level of the storm. What else you got?
Okay, this Lee. What is the tipping point in terms of time? When will the population see the impact of the grand solar minimum?
Well, I think we're starting to see that now with the hail, the storms, the flooding, the extreme cold weather, snow in July in the Rockies and in Canada, which is extremely unusual. All the flooding that's going over in Italy, the fires, all of these things together are part of the grand solar minimum. So it's actually impacting us, as we speak. There's lots of crops that are being damaged, lots of crops that are being washed away, cities being washed away, communities being destroyed. So the effects are here. They're only going to continue to get worse. If you want to see them, all you got to do is look around. I mean, you can look at the sky and see it. You can look at any of the data that's coming in, look at the sunspot counts. So it's here. It's just a matter of, it's like you're sitting in a house, and when something starts burning in the kitchen, who smells it first? Well, somebody will smell it, and then somebody else will smell it. This is the same way. All of the factors involved are already here. They just need to wake up and look at it. So it's whether they're going to sleep through the fire or not. Is basically what it amounts to.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. And with the crop losses in the UK, the severe drought, we're repeating a historical cycle that we can go see. We're going to see the increases in price of vegetables this and into the winter, and we're off to the races. It's only going to increase from there.
Yeah, this winter we'll start seeing it more in the northern hemisphere. I mean, and that's what I've been telling everyone is it would be more prevalent the winter of 2018, 2019. We would start seeing more effects of it. And we're seeing that cooling now coming down across the northern parts of the United States. I mean, I follow Joe Bastardi, and he's starting to see these cooling trends and pointing out these cooling trends, and how the pattern now kind of looks like it did during the last grand solar minimum. I mean, he won't say that, but he sees what I've been prodding him with, and I've been doing this for several months now to try to, I mean, I respect Joe Bastardi. He's a great weatherman. That's why I follow him. But if you haven't been told about something and you don't know that that is a factor in what you've been working with or working on, it's kind of hard to go to somebody like that and say, you've been predicting weather for a long time, and you're really damn good at it, but you're missing something here. And they kind of look at you like, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, kid. But it's a new technology, or excuse me, a new science that we've discovered. And there's a lot of sciences to go into it. So when you go to somebody who's an expert, even like some of the solar physicists that I argue with, they just still can't get the electric universe theory through their head. Even though you talk about the sun and you talk about magnetic filaments and umbrals and currents and all this other stuff, and then you look at them and say, well, if all this is electric, magnetism, that's energy, and currents, that's electricity. How does any of that play into nuclear fusion? Because when I talk about nuclear fusion, we don't talk about magnetic umbrals. We don't talk about Birkeland currents. We don't talk about highly charged particles and so on and so forth. It doesn't work quite like that. That's just the radiation that's coming off. So all of the theories of physics doesn't work when you look at the sun. They have to rewrite all of that stuff to try to make it work. It's like a guy said one time, some of the people that are working on this, it's like they're looking through the wrong end of the telescope, trying to explain to you what they think they see. And it is. It's the simplest solution is the way everything in the universe works. It's not all this complex, crazy that this is that and the other. You got to have millions of pages of code or lines of code or theories and so on and so forth to try to explain it. It's simple. In this case, the sun is a plasma sphere that is energized by a highly charged current that goes through the universe, and we're riding that current, and that's what propels us through. And we're riding that, and the current moving through that is what is traveling around that and moving all of our planets around in their orbit and holding them at their position along that current as we travel through the universe. And that's the way it is, folks. The science is proving that every day, and eventually that'll be common knowledge, just like the Earth is round. So what else you got, Dave?
Yeah, well, Lee, the problem with that is it takes decades for a paradigm shift. And if you're a scientist and you do not believe the things that you and I talk about, there's a problem, because all of the observations, none of them match the model, the internal combustion model. What they do match is the new theory, the electric universe model. That theory is being proven every day. So with the old model, all the new observations are always like unexplainable. Well, that's because the model is broken. It sucks. And it's been the same model since the 1800s. We need a new model. We have one. We need to embrace it, and it needs to be taught in schools, because all of the observations are proving electric universe every day.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. And it should be taught in schools and in universities and so on and so forth. And it's not being embraced by the educational institutions like it should be. And that's one, another reason that I'm out here going, look, guys, and I have people that I work with and have worked with for years and decades, and they know if I come to them with something and I explain it to them, they will listen to what I have to say because they've worked with me for so many years. They know I know what I'm talking about. And all I have to do is show them things. So I've got people in different government agencies, different financial institutions, and so on and so forth that have worked with me for decades. And I've started explaining this to them, and they are catching on. They're sending me articles now. So, people will catch on and we'll see it, and it will eventually come out. But, it took, 300 years for people to, believe that the Earth was round over believing it was flat. Hopefully it won't take that long this time. I would hope that everybody, or most everybody in the world that is within, I wouldn't say third world countries, but most everybody else in the world should be able to know well about this within 10 years. Once it catches on, it should be common knowledge. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's common knowledge now, but not in the MSN.
Lee, the world's not flat?
Well, not the last time I checked.
Yeah, so here's the problem. IEEE, which is one of the largest it's the electronic engineers. They adopted the electric universe model a decade ago. And why is it mainstream following suit? If all of the top electromagnetic engineers believe us, why don't the rest of the scientists?
Well, it's just because they've been taught that Santa Claus powers the sun. And now, just because you guys over there believe that, we've been trained for 50 years that Santa Claus and his reindeer put that power in that sun, and that's what we're going to believe. That and a little bit of pixie dust. And you just can't get them to stop believing that. It takes a complete paradigm shift. You're going to have to, put it in their face. And there will be people who will go to their grave. It doesn't matter how much evidence you give them, that will never believe that the sun is electric, and will never believe that there are grand solar minimums, and that those people, do not preach upon deaf ears, because they're never going to listen to you. So don't waste your time. Just drop little hints and, wear the apparel and, support it when people ask. And it's growing, and there will be more people asking. It can only snow so much before people say, look, this isn't global warming. And that's starting to happen now.
Well, I love a good 3 foot of global warming. Anyway, let's move on to an interesting topic. This comes from Smoke Striker 125. Lee, have you ever heard of what are your thoughts on the sun and other related phenomenon like astral projection and remote viewing?
Okay, yeah, I lost the first part of that question, so I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I will be happy to. They're trying to call me on the phone, so we'll have a better connection. So we're again from Smoke Striker. Have you ever heard of near-death experiences, and what are your thoughts on it, as well as astral projection and remote viewing?
Okay, as far as near-death experiences, a friend of mine has died numerous times, and she wrote a book called Coming Back, the Afterlife. And she explains in that book about seeing lights and dreams and so on and so forth, and then, being revived during surgeries and a heart attack. And so she describes in that what she saw. Now, do I believe she saw that? Absolutely. I believe that every person, as they start to die, the oxygen started to deplete it inside of their brain, and the neurons start firing within the cerebral cortex. You will see bright light. You will see visions. Your life will flash before your eyes, and that is actually your brain dying. And so and I know that 80% of the population will disagree with what I'm about to say, because 80% of the population believes in a hereafter of some type or some greater being. I personally do not. Having been with the medical field and studying religions and the afterlife and here, this, that, and the other, I believe that we are just like a plant, a tree, a dog, a donkey. Doesn't matter what it is. You are here for a time, and when your time is up, your time is up. So I don't follow any religion. I don't follow any particular laws. I follow one rule, and that rule is always do the right thing. And so if you always follow that rule, then you'll always do the right thing, and you don't have to worry about stepping on anybody's toes. You don't have to worry about breaking any laws. You don't have to worry about pissing anybody off or any of those things. Just always try to do the right thing. So no, I don't believe in a hereafter. Now, as far as remote viewing, I do have personal experience with that. At one time, I was requested to test an individual for remote viewing capability, and I brought in a topographical map of a region of the United States that I knew that there were some facilities underground in that area. And that individual was able to point out 2 of the 3 underground facilities on that map, and the guy had never met me before. Additionally, my mother has some abilities to somewhat of premonitions to see things before they happened, and she's demonstrated that hundreds of times through my life of being able to know things and see things before they happen. So that I do believe in that because I've seen that.
Okay, Michelle or Michael Holiday, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. How many years of food should I stockpile?
5. 5 years of seeds and 5 years of food, because if you have 2 or 3 years of crop failure, you're screwed.
Yes, indeed. Hey, let's get on with the next question. I don't understand the next one. Villa and James, 2-part question. During the pole flip, when the cosmic rays are the strongest, what are the unseen effects on the human body? That's part 1.
Okay, so the pulse shift won't really affect the amount of cosmic rays coming in, because they're affected by how much is coming out of the sun and by the magnetosphere, not the magnetic poles. So they will change the pattern of them coming in ever so slightly, but it's mainly controlled by the magnetosphere itself. As far as the effects, there are effects on your different parts of the core of your brain, as well as there are effects on your cardiac system, as far as having different arrhythmias within your heart. So that's the different amounts of cosmic rays, as well as it can affect, giving you cataracts in your eyes, so that the particles can do a variety of different things to you.
freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and we probably have a better connection.
To the magical,
and this is the second half of the Inconvenient Truth, prepping for the Grand Solar Minimum with our guest, military electronics expert Lee Wilbarger. He's been with the Department of Defense since the 80s. That's decades, I believe.
Monday nights,
last time I
10 to 12
counted.
p.m. Eastern,
Almost since
right
the global
here
warming
on
ended,
Studio
Lee.
B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Since Reagan. Before we get on some more questions, let's talk about the solar...
The opinions expressed on this radio station,
Yacht.
its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or
we got a
affiliates.
bumper now.
You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Your host. Oh my God, let's do it again, Lee. This is Diamondback with the Inconvenient Truth with Lee Wilbarger on the second part of our radio program. And I just was questioning Lee about his new project. Well, it's not new. He's been working on it for years. He's been trying to get this blue solar yacht. What's the name of it? Is it the solar blue yacht? Is it the electric blue solar yacht?
Yeah, electric blue solar yacht.
Okay.
And so I've been doing power since I was a kid. And so I've always loved solar. I've always loved wind and hydro and all of these other ways that we could power the world without, using so much fuel and have to transport it all over the place. And so I started out, I built power systems for communication systems, and then I started doing mobile systems, and then vehicle-powered systems for military applications, putting them in surveillance vehicles, law enforcement vehicles, ambulances, so that they didn't have to idle on the side of the highway. And, the solar panels kept getting bigger, and everybody kept saying, oh, well, you can't get enough solar panel on a boat to do it on a boat. And I was like, no, yeah, you can. And so I started doing the calculations and determined that you have to have so much energy from your solar array for overhead. That's your air conditioner, your refrigerator, your ice maker, your water maker, and the radars and so on and so forth on the vessel. And then if you want to go anywhere, you have to have additional power for that. So when you start calculating it out, it turns into be a pretty good sized boat. So I wanted to prove that you could live on a vessel, power everything on the vessel, as well as all of the propulsion of the vessel, all off of solar power alone, no generator on board whatsoever. So I started talking to people about it. Of course, everybody says, you're crazy, you can't do that, it's not possible, so on and so forth. And I said, yeah, you can, here's the math. So I got with the guys from the Navy up the Tuxet River who did work on the trimarans. I got with other boat and ship engineers as far as hull designs. I looked at all different types of vessels that were available and produced over the last 100 years. And I decided on a 1969 Piper trimaran. That's a one of a kind. It is originally the hull of a 43-foot Victress, but it has the floor plan of a 53-foot Empress impregnated into it, which makes the cabin really wide. So she's right now 47 feet in length overall, and she's 24 feet wide. That gives us 4 staterooms, a large V-berth, galley, salon. I've added a large wheelhouse to the back of the vessel, and then a large master bath, laundry room, utility room to the stern. And then I've increased the decks out from the center hull over the backs of the amas on either side of the main hull to give kind of like a patio on either side of the wheelhouse. Then above the wheelhouse, I've installed 10 325-watt solar panels. And then out on the main deck in front of that, I'm going to install another 10 325-watt solar panels. And then currently I have 70 kilowatt hours onboard storage in a dry cell space age lead acid battery as opposed to a lithium. And I've designed the entire vessel to operate at low voltage as opposed to high voltage. So if you have solar arrays in series and a leaf or bird droppings or what have you gets on one of those solar panels, that small leaf will degrade the energy through all of those solar panels that are in that particular string. So in my particular application, I have all of my solar panels in parallel. So if I'm to lose 3% or 10% out of a single panel, I only lose it from that panel, and I don't lose 10% across all of the panels that are in that string. So that's an advantage. That voltage is also just slightly above what the voltages of my battery banks are. So I operate at 36 volts as opposed to 48, so I don't have to have a battery management system. And the battery that I have, or excuse me, the main motor that's inside the vessel is a Warp 9 electric motor, and they use those in Porsches and other electric racing vehicles, and it'll handle up to 275 amps continuously and up to 177 volts, but I don't go that high. I'm only trying to put about 10 kW or so into the electric motor. That's the main drive motor in the center hull. Then on either side of it, of the trimaran, I have amas, that's the pontoon-like things that stick out on either side of a trimaran, and I have keels that stick down under the center of each one of those amas that's about 3 feet in diameter, but it's just half of a circle. And then on the inside of that, I have 2 motor guide 36-volt, 105-pound thrust motors. And I have a joystick controller that allows me to operate those just like an electric wheelchair. So the boat has unbelievable maneuverability. And one of my Star Trek friends was saying, it was like, you know, it's the Star Trek Enterprise, Lee. You've got a warp motor, and now you've got impulse on both of your amas. So that's what we've put on the amas, and that's also a separate power system. So as in the event of a failure of the main drive system on the vessel, those 2 individual thrusters can get us back to shore with no problem at all and move us at about 3 or 4 knots. Then in addition to that, out on the bow of the vessel, I have a motor guide XI5, an additional 36-volt motor that I use as an azipod. And what it does is it sticks down from the bow of the vessel in front of the bow, and it can spin 360 degrees. And so when I plot a course on the chart plotter, the azipod will keep the bow of the vessel within about 3 feet of whatever course I plot. And so that acts as my autopilot. And then I use the main drive motor in the stern, the Warp 9 motor, as the main propulsion, and just mainly use the azipod motor on the bow for course correction. So you can plot in a course and it'll take you there. The entire system is wireless inside the vessel, so I have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connection If I want to go to a dock, I can actually pull into the dock and then mark that dock, then step off of the vessel and then go on the iPad, say here, move out, into the middle of the channel and hold that position. And as long as the current's not in excess of about 4 knots and the wind's not over about 15 knots, the vessel will hold its position right there for as long as I so choose. And then when I want to get back on the vessel, I can just hit on the iPad again and it'll come back over. You step back on the vessel and go again. Then we have video cameras all the way around the boat, DVRs, thermal imagers for looking forward. I use a Wi-Fi type of radar as opposed to a standard radar. And because a regular radar pulses and then you have to wait on the echo, this doesn't. This transmits constantly on a waving modulation scheme and gives you unbelievable resolution at extremely short distances. So whereas at a regular radar on a vessel wouldn't work within 30, 50, 100 feet of the vessel, this will work all the way down to like 5 feet. And the sensitivity of it will allow me to see a small plastic channel marker floating in the water 2,000 feet away. So we have that, and there's a forward-looking sonar under the bow that looks out and tells us our depth so that we don't run aground. Then we have a downward-looking sonar and then 2 side scan sonars that scan out to the sides, and all of that's mapped inside of the computer system so as that we actually produce a map in real time that actually updates on our tablets and everything as we go along. So that's about it in a nutshell. Any other questions on the vessel?
Well, that's a hell of a nutshell. No, just promote Electric Blue Solar Yacht at Electric Blue Boat on Facebook, where you can get a glimpse of it. You can also Google it and see pictures of the Electric Blue Yacht, which is, by the way, Lee, not the only electric yacht. There's a huge yacht called, do you know the name of the one I'm talking about?
Planet Solar.
Yeah, Turner Planet Solar. That thing is massive, but your boat you could take up rivers. This thing you barely could take this thing anywhere. It's a yacht.
Right.
I mean, it's like a cruise ship.
Yes, and it's much wider, so it's extremely limited in its capabilities. The crazy part about it was when I was doing all my math and calculations and talking to the guys from the Navy Sea Surface Center and so on and so forth, when we were doing the math, we actually calculated it up that as long as it wasn't really rough seas, because they can outrun me in rough seas because they have a greater sea state capability than I do. But if it was over level water, I could outrun them. So if it's over smooth water, because I have less drag, and I'm right at about, when you count everything that I lose, I'm close to about 80% efficiency from what I get from the solar array. So I wanted to challenge them to a race, but I don't think there's any place that we could do that it would be fair. But that's their vessel is when I designed the drive propulsion system, the prop, pitch, the shaft rotation speed, the whole speed of the vessel, the drag, the wind drag, and all of that on my vessel. I designed all of that to outrun that vessel because that was the cutting edge at the time. And there's stuff that's even more cutting edge than what I'm doing being produced now. But as far as a private individual doing this, my wife and I, this is basically the majority of where this came from. So we are basically the largest privately owned solar yacht that was privately owned and built and converted in the world. There's nobody else that has a boat that's 47 by 24 that has 70 kW with 4 electric motors, and we run the air conditioner, the water maker, the refrigerator, the stove, the microwave. All of that is all ran off of solar, and we've already been running all of the systems off of solar using only half of the array. So we're quite happy, and it's actually been running for over a year now.
Lee, you're clearly the solar yacht pimp of the universe, and we do not dispute that. Would you like to get back to some more Grand Solar Minimum questions?
Absolutely.
Can I jump in with the question?
No, Scott, you've already created enough trouble. Okay,
no, it's a good question.
Okay.
So you don't have to say what it is, but are you prepared for after the shit hits the fan if someone approaches your ship?
Oh, yeah. That's be the worst mistake you made. I used to make systems what we call, if you try to break into a highly secure facility, underground facility or military facility, and they got stuff in there that they really, really don't want you to see, as you're trying to go down through the hallways to get into there, we are allowed to, how shall we say, add some extracurricular activities to make your entry a little bit more difficult. And it's called running the gauntlet. And so there are a variety of obstacles that will be in their way prior to that. And then in addition to that, there's some, how shall we say, some intimidation capabilities. So there's several gyro-stabilized lasers, so I can light you up in green, blue, red, or a color that you can't see. And then, of course, anything could be added to that that could follow that beam down there. So, yeah, if it hits the fan. And then also what I've done in the design of the vessel is if it does hit the fan, because I'm using lower voltage panels, and it doesn't matter if you fry all of the electronics on my boat. You can fry them off. You can steal them all off. Doesn't matter. As long as the motor is in the bottom and I got a wire that'll go from the solar panels down to the motor, I can make that damn thing move. So that's why I did everything at low voltage, because the panels put out enough power that I can actually hook the panels with no voltage regulation, no charge controller, no batteries at all. I can put all my panels in parallel and connect them directly to the motor and power the motor that way. And then depending upon the amount of power that I want the motor to, so if I want to slow down, I just pull a fuse for each one of the panels that I want to pull out, and I'm pulling 325 watts in the middle of the day back off of that motor each time I pull one of those fuses. So that's how I've made it basically bulletproof. And then I've filled my holes below the waterline with foam. So I have flotation foam. My bow is built up inside well above the waterline with foam coming back a good 7 feet. So, I mean, I can hit an iceberg and you can take the first 5 feet all the way off my boat 2 feet out of the waterline, and no water will come in the boat because that's solid foam like the Coast Guard orange boats are made of. So, you know, I built it as a tank. I don't ever want it to sink. You know, everybody says, well, what's your lifeboat? Because I go around, you know, without a boat. I don't have a dinghy or whatever with it. And they're like, well, what's your lifeboat? And I'm like, good luck making this sink. You know, I've got enough foam in here to support 25 tons, and I only weigh 18,000 pounds.
Excellent. So to be clear, your tank has a cannon.
Let's just say it's capable of defending itself.
Awesome. Okay, my question's done.
Thanks, Scott. Let's get back to some listener questions, Lee. Second part from Samaj Eptis, or Sheila and James. This is a aircrete question. If I built this shelter from air concrete, how thick does it need to be effective? He doesn't say effective against what, or what do I need to make it effective?
You need to put, I think he's trying to be effective against an EMP or a CME.
Okay.
And what I would say in that is when you put up your mesh that you're going to spray that on, or if you're going to use like a backing board, just put a solid copper or stainless steel screen in that, and make sure that all of the walls, so when you put up the meshing, just, you know, put this over it and spray some concrete on it and just keep on going at it. So put a layer of concrete down and then put the screen on top of it, and then just spray it, you know, the concrete over top of it to seal it inside of that, and make sure that when it's on the ground that it goes in and it grounds into the ground good, and dig down in the ground a little bit, put a layer across, and then you can put something on wood or whatever inside of that steel door, and that's your protection. And depending upon how thick the concrete is and the screen and so on and so forth, you could probably easily get, I think, 45 dB of attenuation out of that. So I would still put it in a trash can and wrap whatever it is, you know, in another little layer of aluminum foil, or put an EMP blanket over top of it.
Yeah, like we have a steel container out here. We have EMP trash cans in it, and then the things inside the trash can are then wrapped in foil, which are wrapped in foil inside of a box. Like, there's no reason why you wouldn't put layers of protection, because it's only going to help.
Yeah, the more layers, it's just like adding layers of body armor to you. You know, every time you put another layer of aluminum foil there, that's like putting another bulletproof vest layer in front of you. And then when you put the steel container and the steel trash can over top of the aluminum foil, that's like adding plates to the body armor. So you're really protecting what's inside that.
Yeah, and that's how we do it here for the real sensitive stuff, and why not do it for everything? So let's move on to another question from Stoic God. And this is a hypothetical one, which I can answer scientifically, but I'd love to hear your opinion, because he goes a little long-term here. He watches many YouTube channels. Does he think areas like Manhattan and the rest of the country, as it is stated in one documentary he watched, will be under a mile thick of ice anytime soon, or anytime in the future, whether it takes 100 or thousands of years? What's your opinion?
Well, a mile thick would be glaciation. And at that point, the ice would actually extend all the way down to the North Carolina, Virginia line, and the Chesapeake Bay would be frozen over as well. So that's how far that would extend down. Do I foresee that freezing that far in the next 30 years? Well, that would depend upon whether we go into a weaker state of the sun or not, as far as going into like a solar shutdown as opposed to a grand solar minimum. During a severe grand solar minimum, I wouldn't see a foot or a mile thick of ice over New York. I would surely see ice over in the wintertime over New York Harbor, Hudson River, Long Island Sound, Delaware Bay. All of those would have substantial ice on them and pretty much be incapable of being kept cleared by icebreakers. We don't have enough icebreakers in our inventory to be able to support that, even using tugboats from around New York Harbor. They're just not designed for that. So, that would be a difficulty that they would have there. And you're going to start seeing more ice in New York starting this winter, and it's just going to progress a little bit farther down and a little bit thicker, each year as we progress into this. So within the next 10 years, there's going to be some massive ice in New York. Won't be a mile thick, but there will definitely be ice on New York Harbor in the wintertime, and a lot more ice and snow in the streets as New York City tries to get rid of all of it.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. And if I can add my geologic expertise, as far as the Wisconsinian glaciation, which peaked back in the 16,000 years before present to 18,000, in that time frame, the Appalachians held back most of the glacial ice. So if you were, let's say, sitting in Philadelphia and you were looking to the northwest, you would see a 2-mile-high glacial wall of ice, the end moraine of the entire ice sheet up in the northern hemisphere. It didn't advance past that Kittatinny Ridge, that quartzite ridge. It was actually holding it back. Now, to the north of that, in the Catskill region, some spilled over in Manhattan. In those regions in New York, there are striations on Rat Rock, on the schist there, that did see ice up to maybe up to a mile. It could have been a kilometer. It's all speculation. It could have just been 900 feet thick. But there was massive ice there. Now, it would take hundreds of years to build that, because you need to have precipitation building up. So it can't happen overnight. But just like you said, Lee, what will happen overnight, so to speak, geologically instantaneous, is freezing of rivers. You'll see the overwintering of ice on Hudson Bay and areas up in Baffin. Northern Passage will be froze shut and will not melt. And then the glacial ice will slowly build in your lifetime. That's the most reasonable assumption.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Okay, let's get on to another good question here. Can you explain how the pole shift will affect weather in North America? Which states will become 35 degrees from the equator? Now, this is a whole problem in the misunderstanding of what's going on. The rotational pole is not going to change. It's the magnetic pole. They're independent. So 35 degrees north of the equator is always going to be 35 degrees north of the equator relative to our rotational pole. It's the magnetic pole that's flipping. So we're going to still be...
and not the magnetosphere.
Help it out.
No, and not the magnetosphere, because you got to remember there's 3 of these things, okay? So you have the Earth's rotational pole, which is as far as the physical being of the planet, and it rotates on its axis. Then you have the magnetic north and south pole, which is what we use for our compasses. And then out in space around that, you have our magnetosphere, which is what does the interaction with the particles and so on and so forth and drives the weather. So as far as the magnetic pole shift of the planet, its effect on the weather of the planet will be pretty much insignificant. It's mainly the magnetosphere and the solar winds and the particles and the temperature that control what the weather is doing, and how much additional cloud nucleation, how dry it gets, how much more dry it gets in Africa, and more particles coming across to create more precipitation, like hurricanes or large storms throughout North America, even going across through Central America and out into the Gulf to the Pacific. So all of those play into it. But as far as changing the weather, the magnetic pole is basically insignificant.
Yeah, and as the magnetosphere wanes, which is independent of the magnetic pole flip, which is independent of our rotational pole. Now, as that wanes, that's waning because the sun's shutting down. And like when we were in solar max, the sun is shooting out CMEs regularly, and that builds our magnetosphere. It's a protective mechanism of our Earth to protect against solar storms that come in regularly. So the more solar activity we have during solar max, the thicker our magnetosphere gets. But when we go into grand solar minimum and the sun shuts down epically, like we just came off of 30 days of spotless, we'll probably go into a 50-day spotless and then a 100-plus day. That is what wanes the magnetosphere because it doesn't need to build up to protect from anything. And that's what puts us at risk.
Yeah, I keep looking at this sunspot deal that you're saying there's a sunspot there, and it reminds me of the old Wendy's commercial of "Where's the beef?" But in this case, where's the spot? And the other thing about that, the one thing I wanted to add to that, as far as the particles spewing out of the sun and the sun's greater activity, when we have less activity like we have now, we have greater coronal holes, and those particles spew out of that. When you have sunspot activity, you have magnetic umbrals that reach way out into space, and they are supercharged magnetic fields, and they capture those highly charged particles, and it makes them glow. And so we see those particles being captured. But when we do not have that activity of those magnetic umbrals out into space to capture those particles, then more of them spew out and come to our planet and interact with our atmosphere and create more rain, so on and so forth. So it's those magnetic umbrals during high solar activity that capture a lot of those particles and also affect the particles coming in that are galactic cosmic rays and can control those because we have a stronger heliosphere that extends out through our solar system.
Yeah, but as we descend into this minimum, Lee, we're going to have cosmic radiation raining down on our heads like never before. And I had a question for you. My question is, if we wore an actual tinfoil hat, because most cosmic rays are coming perpendicular to the Earth because they're distance away, they're basically coming straight in at us and straight through the planet. Couldn't we wear a hat or make like a cosmic ray umbrella to deflect them?
No, they are moving at the speed, almost the speed of light. They're extremely small. They pass right through. Sometimes they hit DNA, sometimes they don't. So, there's not really anything that you can do about the particles themselves. Now, as far as, CMEs and EMPs and things of that nature, there are things that you can wear that'll help protect you, but not so much for stopping the particles.
How strong of a magnetic field would you, let's just say you threw up a magnetic field over your house, could you put one up strong enough to?
I wouldn't want to live under it.
Okay. It'd have to be that strong.
Yeah, and really all you're going to do is divert its course. I don't think you're going to contain it. It's because it's moving so fast. So you're just going to make it do like when you do the experiment of the alcohol in the terrarium to see the cosmic rays come in. So when you see a collision and you see that little curly cue that comes off after the collision as it passes through the gas, that's basically what you're going to do. You're just going to, highly affect its trajectory. You're basically, it's the same as aligning a electron as they fire it through an electron gun on an old CRTV. So the old CRT TV tubes, the old glass tubes, there's an electron gun firing electrons through that, and they use magnetic fields with above, below, left, and right to align that gun to fire to illuminate each one of the pixels on the screen. 480 by 512 or whatever it was in the old days. So basically that magnet is doing the exact same thing. It's just way stronger. Then it would, like I said, probably make a curly cue out of it and send it back where it came from or somewhere in that general direction, something of that intensity. But it's not going to stop it from hitting you.
No, because what it would do is the ones that were going to hit you won't hit you, and the ones that weren't going to hit you will hit you.
Well, it'd probably bring more to you because you've got a magnet on. So.
Not good. Anything else, Scott?
No, that's 2 strikes. I'm out.
Okay, Lee,
we'll give you 3 at least, buddy.
Yeah, this comes from Mr. Boo Boo, another big fan, Mr. Boo Boo 1972. How much personal hands-on in the field training, schooling, class time do you have while in the military?
30 years.
And what he says, what's your MOS?
I don't have an MOS. I'm a director. So when you go in and you were in the military, anybody that's been in the military has went to a schoolhouse. And in that schoolhouse, there's the mayor, who's the man in charge of it. And then there's the man who goes out and teaches you the new technology that's never been seen before, used before, developed, or tested. I'm that guy. So if it's brand new, I'm the guy that's there teaching you how to use it. I'm the guy that trains the trainer. So I've been trained on almost everything. I'm licensed on 24 different military vehicles to operate. I've operated basically every weapon system out there, helped develop the laser designator for the Mark 19, the PAC-4 laser, the TWS thermal weapon sight, the heads-up display, Land Warrior, Force 21 Land Warrior, digitized soldier program, worked on the TOW, the tube-launched optically tracked wire-guided missile, worked on the add-on that for the Bradley and the Stryker. So you have on the Bradley, you have the IVAS, which is Improved Bradley Acquisition Site, as well as the ITAS, which is the Improved TOW Acquisition Site. And on the very first 3 Bradleys that were ever built, I was the guy that went to Redstone Arsenal and tested all of those thermal weapon systems and tracking systems and fired the missiles and so on and so forth. I oversaw that for the Battle Lab. Did the same thing on the Avenger missile launcher system when they did the upgrade of the thermal weapon system on that, as well as the low light visible camera system. I was the guy that oversaw that. I'm the guy who designed the TSC-128 Bravo, known as Trojan Spirit. I worked on the WIN, which is the Warfighter Information Network, the Warfighter Information Network Tactical, which is the WIN-T. Put cell phones on the battlefield, encrypted cell phones on the battlefield, night vision, thermal imager, invented the first heads-up display, see-through heads-up display for an American soldier, the first color see-through heads-up display, the first compatible with night vision goggles, and did the first interface of a thermal weapon sight to a heads-up display. And probably about 200 or 300 other programs that I can't talk about. So that's what I used to do.
And I can answer the rest of this. He says he doesn't want you to leak any information, but do you still communicate with people in the military?
Daily.
Yeah, and in fact, they're listening in probably to our radio show right now, Mr.
Oh, you
Boo-Boo.
can bet your life on that.
They probably listen in to our regular Skypes that Lee and I have impromptu here at the ranch.
Well, I found out a long time ago that there's a list of people that the government likes to listen to. And one of the jobs that I had was when we could first pull out keywords in conversations through voice recognition. The list came to me and it had 144 words on it. And when it left my desk, it had 254 words on it. And so the list has grown. It's way bigger than that now. They can read, hear anything, decipher it however they want. It doesn't matter. But there was a list of people that were monitored regularly, and I got to see that list, and my name was on it. So I know that what I say is recorded. That's just, when you do what I do for a living, you can guarantee that they monitor your email, your phone calls, your text, where you go. I mean, even when I fly, like when I went to Ukraine, when I landed in Paris and got on the aircraft to fly into the Ukraine, and when you've done this for a long time, you can tell who those guys are. There were guys on the aircraft with me that the Ukrainian government had as their air marshals that flew on the aircraft with me, not to my knowledge, but were on the aircraft. And then when we landed and we got off first and got into our bus and went over to go through our customs, after we got off the bus or off the aircraft and they had taken all of our luggage off and we went through, while we were being screened and everybody else was still getting off the aircraft, the security detail that had been put on that aircraft came through, and I pointed out to my lawyer and my translator at the time that those were the two guys on the plane that I had pointed out. And so I asked the head of security in there who those two guys were, and they said, well, that was y'all's security coming from France. So even when I come through the airports and so on and so forth, they always scrutinize me more. Because it's who I am. So you can rest assured, if you go through the airport with me, everything in your luggage will be searched and scanned, just because of what I've done for so many years. So that's just the way it is. When you live in this day and age and you do the things that people like me do, the government wants to make sure that you don't have people like Audrey Dames and these other guys giving these secrets to other countries. And so I don't give out anything that's classified. Never have, and I'm not about to now. Anything I talk about, I either know is common knowledge or have already seen it released publicly. And so I'm very careful about what I say so I don't get myself in trouble.
Yeah, I can only imagine my file. I worked in activism exposing Monsanto and the revolving door, and my father had government contracts with spy-proofing all the Navy ships in the 80s through Reagan. And I built some of those shielded rooms that we had discussed in earlier shows for the government, under government contracts. And then I turned to anti-government in a certain sense, trying to expose the nonsense. And let's dive a little deeper into wiretapping and Ed Snowden stuff. This is coming from Joey Delgado, and it says, thank you, Diamond and Lee, for what you're doing and all the work you do behind the scenes. This is risk management. This is a good question, Lee. Can the NSA really listen in through your home TV, computers, if you have the wrong apps? And are they filming us? And are they in there watching us jerk off to weird porn?
They can anytime they want. So that actually started with Nielsen ratings back in, I think, the late 80s or early 90s. And what they actually did was, they didn't want to have to keep calling people to ask them, what they were watching. So what they did was, in the cable box itself, they actually would monitor with a camera. It was a thermal imager, so it really couldn't tell who was in the room. You were just like blobs, but it would be able to see the number of blobs and see you moving around and be able to tell when you got up for a commercial and come back in. And it would record all that and send it back to Nelson. So they got in big trouble for that. That's where that began. Now, if you have a smart TV and it's got a camera on it, so on and so forth, yes, they can monitor everything. Anytime you plug television, an appliance, or anything else into your house, into the internet, you just opened the door for the U.S. government, as well as many, many other governments around the world, access into your inner life. So they can tell what you're watching on TV. If the TV has a camera on it for interactive TV, they can turn that camera on. They can do that through a computer and turn the computer's camera on. They can do it through your cell phone. So you can actually, you can actually take control. You can think that you cut your phone off, but you didn't. Your phone is still on. They can turn on the camera, turn on the microphone. They can tell you the angle. If it's laying on its back, they turn on the camera that's looking up. If it's laying on its face, they turn on the camera that's looking back. They can tell if you're holding it in your hand from the vibration. I worked on a project for an advanced 911 system that you could actually lay the phone on your chest in a 911 situation, and I could give you your pulse and respiration and heartbeat and give you an EKG strip just off of the sensor inside of the phone from the internal movement. So yeah, they can do more with your phone than you can.
Yeah, Fitbit, I think Fitbit they're collecting data for artificial intelligence. Like, don't do it. It's nonsense. And more importantly, I mean, we're talking about corrupt systems. It's this shadow government. It's inside, outside, military-industrial complex. The layers are extreme. So, in your opinion, Lee, how corrupt is the CIA and or NSA? And are there subgroups within? And, the majority is legit, but there's like something else afoot inside.
Well, I don't want to say that any particular agency is corrupt, because they're not.
Yeah.
Okay. There are people who have been put in place over decades who were part of what we call the deep state. And those people follow a particular political agenda. And so what they do is they create difficulty in trying to do the right thing. And they've been there for a long time, and now they're working to remove some of those individuals. Does it exist? Absolutely. Has it been there a long time? Absolutely. Is it going to be really hard to get rid of? Absolutely. It's going to be a battle of unbelievable proportions because of the power, influence, and capability of not only the technology, but how that technology can be leveraged against one particular party or group or individual. And that is a massive, massive machine that can gather approximately 10 bits of information per every person in the United States every day. And so whether that's your doctor's appointment or what you got on a test or whatever it is, there's 10 tidbits on average about every child, adult, elderly that's alive in the country every day is on average just what the NSA collects. So then you've got, the CIA that's not supposed to collect on the U.S., but hey. And then you have other intelligence agencies within the U.S., law enforcement, and then there are military organizations that also do some intelligence gathering around the United States to prevent, how should we say, adversaries from communicating in and out of the country.
We're just like moments away from creepy computers controlling the planet and where we can't get back in the spaceship. I'm sorry, Lee. You can't come back in. We know you've been talking to Diamond.
Yeah.
Let's get to some practical issues here. What's the best cold weather clothing, coats, shoes, etc.? And the only thing I'm going to say is cotton kills.
And layers.
Amen.
And things that are weatherproof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, be practical. And you can even be prepping these at your local thrift shop. I find some of the most awesome pure wool pants at thrift stores for $5. I mean, these are pants that would cost $150 if you bought them online.
Yeah, it's just a matter of layers and, getting in. The best thing I've actually found that's cheap and works real good is the coveralls that you can buy from like Tractor Supply that are the heavy, denim lined coveralls. A layer of that, a couple other layers underneath. you can go out, below 0 Fahrenheit in that. If you've got a good skull cap on and some gloves and some good boots, that'll keep you warm with just a few layers underneath of it.
Yeah, and with that kind of padding, you could fly off a four-wheeler at 90 miles an hour and not even get a scratch.
Depends on where you land.
All right, let's get to some more questions. We only have 174 more to go in 18 minutes. Joey Delgado, how will people with pacemakers be affected during a CME or EMP? Not good, Joey.
Yes, and I'm actually working on something for that. So I'm working on some clothing that can protect pacemakers as well as other machines that inject insulin for diabetics and so on and so forth, that you could wear that clothing and protect that electronics under that clothing. Or if you had a pacemaker, your chest cavity would be protected so that you wouldn't have to worry about a CME or an EMP.
Now, this guy that lives next door to me here, he's got a pretty new pacemaker. It's keeping him alive. And then something happened with a satellite a few months ago, and it stopped sending signals to his pacemaker, so he didn't know if he was alive or not. And it freaked him out until the satellite got fixed. So what the heck is that connection with pacemakers and satellites? I don't get it.
Yeah, I can't tell you that. I do not know. I don't know.
Yeah. So, that freaked him out. So if the satellites get affected and that freaks out pacemakers, then that could be bad news.
Yeah, again, I don't know the relationship between pacemakers and satellites.
Okay, here, quick. Let's move on. Woodworks 14323. Curious if there's any building materials that could possibly block cosmic rays.
Not that anybody that's listening to this program can afford.
Yeah, maybe not even the government, or that's where all that missing money went. Eastern Kentucky looking like the most resourceful option for relocation from what I'm seeing. Population density, where people are going to be migrating into the near future, etc. Thoughts?
As long as you're south, of 35 degrees, you're probably going to be okay as far as, it not being too cold there or being, a permafrost condition and having an extremely short growing season. You're still going to have bad weather, and people still need to be worried about fault lines. The New Madrid, San Andreas fault, all of those faults have a high likelihood, up around 80% likelihood of going off significantly. We're talking, magnitude 8, 9 earthquakes over, say, the next 30 years. So you need to definitely keep that, in your thoughts as far as where you choose to, homestead or, plant your roots.
Yeah, stay away from big fault lines. Jimmy Anderson asks how much the temperatures will decrease worldwide by 2020.
Not much. I wouldn't think that by 2020 we would be much more than maybe a degree or 2 C at most, because we're already, nearing the end of 2018, so we're only talking about, another 16 months until the beginning of 2020. So, it won't be that much difference between now and then. It will continue to decline. We're seeing that decline. Of course, global warmers are going to say, oh, it's the hottest here, it's the hottest there. But if you follow Jay Bastardi, you'll find out that that's not true. He, teaches them a lesson every day. So, we are getting colder, and we're going to continue to get colder. And you're going to see wild swings in temperature change. So it's not like the summer's going to disappear. You're still going to have hot days just like you did before. But, in August, where you normally have, an evening that might be 60 degrees, you might get a cold front that comes through that's 25 with hail and snow and everything else that goes along with it and destroy your crops. That's the danger of it. It's the wild temperature swings and the wild weather created by the deep troughs within the jet stream. And when you have those deep troughs and you've got moisture coming in and cold temperatures with warm moisture, you're going to get this. And then you have the additional charged particles, the additional amounts of atmospheric compression from the nucleation. And so it just makes it worse and worse.
No truer words have been spoken. And Jimmy Anderson, I can follow up by saying global temperatures have dropped 0.67 degrees C since the El Nino 2016. They've dropped 0.43 degrees this year alone. And my prediction is 0.6 to 0.8 degrees C by 2020, which is going to put us below, if you look at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, any temperature since the 80s that we've ever recorded on Earth. So within the next year and a half, we're going to record earthly temperatures colder than ever been recorded in the last 50 years, and that will be the global average.
Yeah, and we're going to start seeing, weather like we saw, like around 77, 76 when we had the blizzards.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what
3 and 4 feet of snow on these nor'easters will be typical from Virginia all the way up to Maine, maybe 2 or 3 a year, with very heavy accumulations. And and they're going to stay around maybe for a while.
Right. That's the problem, is you're going to get it, and then you're going to get it again, and then you're going to get it again, but it didn't go anywhere from the first 2 times. And it just keeps stacking up.
Yeah, and with population density like we have, we saw just a few years ago up in Boston, the snow didn't melt until late in July, that they were stockpiling, and they had nowhere to put it. Even if they're dumping it off bridges, eventually the snow hits the top of the bridge, especially if the rivers are frozen. So I think we're going to see crazy stuff like nowhere to put snow in the very near future.
Yeah, places like New York and any other major city, airports. I mean, everybody's going to have a problem. You're going to have parking lots with piles as big as the buildings almost.
So they're going to be incinerating it, and I believe that's the future. They're going to be burning snow.
Yeah, that's a crazy way to deal with it.
Or like shipping it to the Midwest and making a mountain. What do you think they'll do?
If I were in charge, I would find an area that they could just bring it in and blow it into, and just keep blowing it out into a field. So like go up, say like pick a large landfill. And so you go to the ridge on the downward side, the leeward side of that landfill, and you would put a giant snowblower there and have a tunnel, or a hopper that you could feed it into, and just keep blowing it downwind to the downhill side of that and fill that area in. Because, I mean, look, when it gets so cold that it doesn't melt, and you get 3 feet each time, that's got to go somewhere. And you're talking, millions of tons of this is going to have to be moved and dealt with. And you're not going to be able to put it into waterways, because now all you're doing is helping with the ice jam. And like you said, yeah, you can pour it off the bridge, but you're only going to move so far off that bridge with that snow. So you either got to be blowing it out into a waterway or something of that nature, blowing it out into the ocean or onto a body of water that the wind is going to carry it away. Because if you're not, then it's just going to give it right back to you as soon as the winds, catch it, and they're going to blow it back up. You're going to have, drifts and everything else that you're going to be dealing with. I mean, it's going to be a major problem. And then the freezing of the wastewater treatment plants, the regular water treatment plants, they aren't buried. They were not designed to deal with this extremely cold climate that we're going to be moving into. So there's going to be lots of problems with water and wastewater, as well as the electrical grid, because it's going to be an increased demand on the electrical grid. And then when you talk about, everybody goes, we got electric cars too. Look at how much power that the electric cars are adding to the electric grid. We've already got a very weak electric grid as it is.
That's insane. Now, my biggest fear, and I did a survey back maybe 20 years ago about what the Army Corps of Engineers did to the levee systems on our major rivers, and I predicted that New Orleans would flood. And 11 years after my prediction, it flooded catastrophically because of the Army Corps of Engineers fixing the flooding problem. Now, these ice jams in the future and the levees that are on major rivers are going to wreak havoc, and there's going to be catastrophic ice jams, catastrophic flooding of communities, and in freezing times. And you don't have freezing flood water that freezes is bad news. I was in Floyd in '89 on the East Coast, and that happened in January. The Schuylkill River rose like 50 feet, flooded our entire community.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you're going to see that again and again and again. That's already starting to happen here in the United States. In the wintertime with some of these ice jams in places that they haven't had them. So that's already becoming prevalent.
only going to be increasing as we, year after year. This is coming from Mike Glenn. What will your shopping list look like if you just started prepping?
Beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. And water source. Water source is number one.
In fact, there's one guy that came up here for the weekend. We went to the store, and there was bullets on sale, and he bought a case. Done.
Yep, we pick them up when we go get milk.
Mail or milk?
Milk. So pretty much every time we go to town.
Okay, what do you think about the extremely convenient disruption of the 4 main satellites that we're being told about now due to aging?
It's kind of ironic, and I don't really think it's aging. I think that they have been subjected to so much abuse here recently from our sun that's being detrimental to their operational capability. So stuff does get old, but when you look at when you look at SDO or any, SOHO or whatever other instrument you so choose to look at the sun with, and you see some of, the whiteouts that you see on the sensor when the highly charged
flares come off, man. They're getting fried, Lee.
Yeah, it's just, it's just you can only do that to a sensor for so long, and so I think that everything is going to see a little bit more wear and tear than what it normally did. And if in those satellites, if they all had a common design, they all also may have a common weak point. And so if those highly charged particles are finding that weak point, well, then yes, it would affect all of them somewhat equally. So, I haven't went over the electrical schematics of the birds to determine why they're failing or what have you, but I think we're going to see more failures in the near future.
Yeah, and I think the problem is resiliency. So, and here's what I've been thinking. I've been thinking that if we get all the top scientists around, they can't all be so stupid that they've only created these satellites to withstand space weather that we've known about in the past. You would think they would engineer them to experience some anomalous, more extreme space weather. Now, that being said, what if the degradation from cosmic rays is so severe because there is no shielding that there's no way they could shield these satellites from the degradation? It's inevitable. So the next ones they send up are going to fry quickly as well, and again and again. Because, there's just no way to shield from cosmic rays that we can effectively do.
Well, they're getting better. And, you have to understand when the spacecraft that are failing now were put up, we weren't aware of what we know now. So the increased shielding or hardening of the electronics on those or what have you was not incorporated into those. Some of the things that we're putting up now are much, much, much more robust than what we were putting up, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So we are getting better and understanding, these issues that we're going to have to deal with, and realizing that the abundance of these highly charged particles is higher than what we had originally anticipated. And so more of that hardening is taking place, and they're going to continue to do that and do the best job that they can. I'm actually pretty surprised at how well some of the stuff up there is holding up, considering what's already been banging on it. And it's a matter of, if you bang on something long enough, it's going to break. So it doesn't matter how well you make it. You go banging on the side of it long enough, and that's eventually going to cause some issues. And basically, that's what these, charged particles hitting these things are doing. They're hitting them with the circuits, the ICs, the chips, the CCDs, the charge coupled detectors. So all of that is being abused by these outbursts of the sun.
I also think it might be an excuse to take them offline so that they're in exclusive control of the data while we're not exposed to it.
Well, but there are other ways that we can gather that data. There are expeditions that go out and measure positions, and there are other radars and things that you can do it with. So there's a variety of ways that you can glean that information. And now you have all the GOES satellites and so on and so forth. So I'm not that concerned about those 4 birds.
Yeah, we're going to definitely find better data streams that are unadulterated, unhomogenized, and give us the facts. And I agree with you there. There's definitely going to be temperature sensors that don't go offline, and all the new weather satellites, you can infer all kinds of things from those. Lee, we just got 4 minutes left here, and Little Red Hen has a great question. I think it's practical for a lot of people. We've talked a lot about how to keep your house from burning up from a big CME or EMP, and that is a breaker system before the panel that includes a bus fuse, an old school type screw-in fuse,
as well as a lightning protection, like what they call a biscuit, or some type of a lightning arrestor.
Okay, so and she wants to know how would she, because she doesn't know anything about electricians, she wants to call an electrician and ask for him to do it. What does she ask him to do?
Just tell him that she would like, or he, whatever, would like to have a lightning arrestor system put on their breaker panel. And so that lightning arrestor system would help stop a CME coming, or an EMP, and would also help with a CME. So that's would be a lightning arrestor system on their breaker panel is what I would have installed. And then I would, again, in the event of something were happening, I would disconnect everything in the house, unplug all of the electrical cords, unplug all the cords out of the power supplies. Chargers and power supplies are the number one things that are destroyed because they have cords and they have coils. So those are the things you need to protect and make sure they're unplugged. And then, like I said, just unplug everything in the house, take every cord off everything in the house that you can, and make sure everything in the breaker panel is turned off.
Amen. Lee, thank you for your insight. Thank you for coming on the show. Sorry about the technical difficulties for our guests and for our listeners. A lot of good information shared tonight. We only got to half the questions. I'm sure you'll be back, Lee. Is that true?
Yeah, anytime. And we'll be on the boat.
Yeah,
we'll be on the boat starting tomorrow. And we're starting a Patreon page. So we're going to be doing videos and how to build a solar yacht. So not only are we going to be doing all of our travels and where we go and things we see and people we meet, but we're also going to be doing videos about actually how to build a solar yacht, how to convert from a sailboat into a solar yacht. So I'm going to be covering all of those facets of the vessel in that Patreon page.
Awesome. That's the Electric Blue Solar Yacht World Tour with Lee Wilbarger, where he's going to do a how-to on how to make your own bug-out solar boat, so to speak. And you can check him out on Facebook at Electric Blue Solar Yacht. You can check him out on Twitter at Lee Wilbarger. You can check out the Oppenheimer Ranch Project on YouTube, on Facebook at Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Solar Shutdown and Plasma Geology. And I think we've got some of the technical glitches worked out. We just have to use old Skype, and Scott can call us all. So it's